Joining me now, Trey Gowdy, former chairman of the House Oversight Committee and a Fox News contributor. Good to see you tonight, sir. Thank you for being here. Yes, so, what do you make of all of, John Brennan and James Clapper very upset that Bill Barr had the audacity, in their terms, to use the spying word yesterday?
Well, he did use the spying word. I prefer the word surveillance. I'm sure they're synonyms, and if they're not, they're first cousins. So
they are, according to Webster's.
If you use the word surveillance, then what Bill Barr said is the least newsworthy thing that was said by anyone yesterday. We already know the United States government was doing surveillance on at least 2 members of the Trump campaign. What we don't know is, were there others? When did it begin? What's the factual predicate? I find it amusing that John Brennan says he received bad information. The reason that you don't use bad information, or to prevent you from using bad information, you're supposed to investigate, corroborate, vet, none of which was done with the dossier. And Clapper, what a drama king, to use the words amazed and stunned. What Barr said is, we're going to look into whether or not the powers given the United States government were used to surveil a presidential campaign. I would hope everyone would want that to happen.
And, when you look back, I went back and looked at the transcript from yesterday a little more closely, and he says, I want to look at the IG report, Horowitz's report, which is coming out, I guess, in the June timeframe, late May, early June timeframe. He said, I want to look at the investigations that were done on the Hill, and then I want to see if there are questions that still aren't answered. And if there are questions that still aren't answered about whether or not there was unsubstantiated, that there wasn't a predicate for basically spying, surveilling members of the Trump campaign, then I think we all need to know about that, because spying on a campaign is kind of a big deal, right?
Spying on any American is a big deal. Doing surveillance, which is why you have to go through certain evidentiary checkpoints before you can surveil an American or intercept communications or wiretap, or even in some states, even have a consensual conversation if you're a law enforcement officer wearing a wire, which also happened in this case. I am really, to use Clapper's word, stunned that anyone would not want to know what was the factual predicate for the United States government to monitor the conversations and activities of 2 campaign officials, regardless of whether they were working for a Republican or a Democrat. I would think all Americans would want to know, how are you using these awesome powers that we entrust you with?
I want to play some of the reaction to Bill Barr, who, prior to yesterday, had a reputation that was fairly even across Republicans and Democrats in terms of how they looked at him and his career. It seems to have changed, on a dime. And here's some of that reaction on the Hill.
If he wanted to be Michael Cohen's replacement as Donald Trump's mouthpiece, he should have applied for that job.
It just raises again the issue of whether or not Barr really is the independent attorney general that this country needs.
Did Attorney General Barr embarrass himself yesterday, disgrace himself yesterday?
Yes, absolutely.
What do you think about that, Trey?
I think that last voice was Eric Swalwell's, and for your viewers that don't know who that is, that's a member of the Judiciary Committee and the Intelligence Committee from California. He's running for president, which I'm sure none of your viewers are familiar with, and they won't be a year from now. So he's trying to get attention. Nancy Pelosi said that Barr was off the rails. If anyone in the country would understand being off the rails, it would be Speaker Pelosi. This is a guy that was voice voted by the Senate. Democrats loved him. They thought he was an institutionalist. He was going to revive the Department of Justice. What they don't like is what he summarized in the Mueller report. That's what they don't like. No collusion, and we decided there's no obstruction of justice. And now, if that wasn't bad enough, now he's going to say something as crazy as, we're going to look at the origins of this investigation to make sure the law was followed. That's what they're upset about.
Well, that obviously has a lot of people very nervous to hear that. I want to put up a statement that Rod Rosenstein just said just a short time ago this evening about Bill Barr, the Attorney General. He said he's being as forthcoming as he can, and so this notion that he's trying to mislead people, I think, is just completely bizarre. What do you say about that?
Martha, I'm in a really small minority. I think Bill Barr is being more forthcoming than he should be. I don't think the Department of Justice should publish derogatory information on someone who has not been charged. So you get Schiff and others talking about beyond a reasonable doubt. That's what you have to convict. They don't even have evidence enough to charge, which is probable cause. So Bill Barr is going to be far more transparent than I think if the shoe were on the other foot and this was a Democrat AG with an uncharged person. Remember what Comey did. And all of us said, when did the government start holding press conferences and announcing derogatory information on people who were not charged? That's exactly what the Democrats want Barr and Mueller to do with President Trump.
And it's worth remembering that that's exactly what Rod Rosenstein outlined in the memo that gave the president the substance to decide to go ahead and fire Jim Comey. At least that's the sequence of events as it was laid out. So it's interesting to hear him say that he's sticking up for Bill Barr. They also worked together very closely throughout this entire process, overseeing the special counsel to the extent that that they did that. I want to say one other thing here about Greg Craig, who's a name that people have heard a lot over the years. He was in the Obama administration, a lawyer. He now has a similar problem, it sounds like to me, and you can tell me what his legal situation is, kind of like what Mike Flynn went through in terms of not registering as a federal agent and doing work for the Ukraine. How much trouble do you think that Greg Craig, this former Obama official, may be in?
Well, I think he's been indicted for making a false statement to the FBI, which is what Papadopoulos and Flynn were also charged with. I guess if you're looking for a bright side, it is that neither Republicans nor Democrats can make false material statements to an FBI agent during the course of an investigation. So if you want a blind justice system, if you want her to wear a blindfold, I think that's good. He's presumed innocent. It is Mueller indicting a Democrat. So for everyone who said there are 13 angry Democrats that are only targeting Republicans, I'm pretty sure this defendant
I just want to give a chance to play this soundbite. This is from Greg Craig, sticking up for himself. Watch.
This prosecution is unprecedented and unjustified. I am confident that both the judge and the jury will agree with me.
Quick thought before we go, Trey?
He better hope the jury agrees with him, and if he were that confident, he wouldn't be having a press conference right now.
All right. Trey Gowdy, always a pleasure, sir. Thank you very much. Good to see you tonight.
Thank you.
There has been a new indictment tied to the Mueller investigation. Today, a major player in the Obama administration has been indicted. He is Greg Craig, who was the former president's White House counsel. Senior political correspondent Mike Emanuel is here with details on that. Good evening, Mike.
Brett, good evening. Greg Craig has been indicted by a federal grand jury for making false statements and concealing material information about his work on behalf of the Ukrainian government. Craig is charged with willfully falsifying and concealing material facts from the Foreign Agents Registration Act unit and making false or misleading statements to that FARA unit. Craig has a long history in legal circles here in Washington, serving in the Obama White House as legal counsel, and back in the Bill Clinton years working as one of the attorneys defending the president during impeachment. Craig's former law firm was hired back in 2012 by the Ukrainian government to compile a report on the prosecution of Yulia Tymoshenko. She's a former Ukrainian prime minister who was a political opponent of the country's then president. Late today, Craig's legal team said he did not mislead the Foreign Agents Registration Act unit of the Justice Department and, quote, it is itself unfair and misleading. It ignores uncontroverted evidence to the contrary. Mr. Craig had no interest in misleading the FARA unit because he had not done anything that required his registration. That is what this trial will be all about. The scrutiny of Craig spun off from special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation of former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort. After the indictment broke, I asked the top Democrat on Senate intelligence for his reaction.
I've known Greg. I've always liked him and respected him, but candidly, I have not followed all of the back and forth. But again, what we continue to see is that this effort and involvement with whether it's Russians or Ukrainians and a host of shadowy figures.
The Justice Department in the announcement notes the maximum penalties are 5 years in prison on each charge and more than $250,000 in fines. Brett?
It's interesting to hear Senator Warner there turn it to the Trump campaign. I mean, it was Greg Craig who has the problems here.
That's right, a Democratic operative for decades, both in the Obama and Clinton White Houses. And so, yeah, he tried to pivot back to blaming the Republicans.
Okay, Mike, thank you.
Fox
News Alert, former White House counsel in the Obama administration and Democratic lawyer Greg Craig indicted moments ago. He's charged with making false statements to the Justice Department, and this stems from special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation of Paul Manafort and his work on behalf of a pro-Russian political party in Ukraine. Before working for President Obama, he had been a senior legal advisor to President Bill Clinton. Let's bring in Andy McCarthy. We're going to make him come back and help explain this to us. This is yet another one of these things where the Mueller investigation turns up another situation, and now Greg Craig. That's kind of a big deal, Andy.
Yeah, it's a big deal because of who he is, but it's really not, it was kind of inevitable, I think, Dana. When Mueller prosecuted Alex van der Zwaan, who was a lawyer that Greg Craig worked with in connection with work that Paul Manafort and his partner Rick Gates were doing for Ukraine, I think the clock was ticking on this. What Manafort alleged was that he had paid $4 million under the table to a law firm which produced a report that was favorable to the Ukrainian government when Manafort was working for it under Yanukovych. They were evaluating a political prosecution that Yanukovych's government had done against his main rival in Ukraine, and the law firm kind of said the human rights violations and the civil rights violations weren't a big deal, and it was essentially fair, and it looks like it was paid for.
And also, this is coming under the was it the FARA Act? I can't remember the acronym, but this is one that, you know, apparently, like in D.C., in the swamp, like, it was okay to break this law for a long time, but the Trump administration said no, and they have gone after people like this.
Yeah, it's the Foreign Agent Registry Act, and the idea is if you're going to be an agent of a foreign government, you have to register with the Justice Department. It's been the law for decades, although I think there are only about half a dozen even attempted prosecutions in about half a century up until Mueller. I don't think anybody should have heartburn about the fact that they're enforcing the law. I'm not crazy about the idea that you change policy under a special counsel. I think it'd be nice if, like, the Justice Department made an announcement and said, hey, guys, you know, we're now enforcing
Tighten
this.
up.
So everybody was on notice. But, yeah. But they've clearly gone after a lot of people on this.
What is a possible punishment for this?
My recollection is it's something in the area of about 5 years. I haven't looked at the statute for a while, but I think that's what it is. So it would be, I don't know how many counts are in the indictment, but every offense would be about 5 years. Guidelines-wise, he wouldn't be looking at a maximum statutory sentence, but that would be, he's a 74-year-old guy, though. It's serious business.
All right, and we're learning more about the charges now, Andy, that you're here with this breaking news just happening. Greg Craig, former Obama administration lawyer, he's accused of making false statements and concealing material information about his activities on behalf of Ukraine from the Justice Department. That's, as you said, Andy. And Craig faces, as Andy, you have a great memory. It's a maximum penalty of 5 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. Can I ask you, though, Andy, so when the bar summary came out, we were there for the breaking news. And I thought that we reported there were no other indictments that were expected. Is this considered separate and apart from that?
Yeah, well, it's hard to nail down what that means, Dana, because as Mueller was wrapping up, they took some of the investigations they were working and they spun them out to other Justice Department components, including, I think, the Eastern District of Virginia, which is where, if I'm remembering right, Craig is indicted. So there are a few other of these matters out there. Obviously, the Roger Stone trial and litigation is still out there. I don't think there's anything big still out there, but there's a few cases.
All right, Andy McCarthy, we appreciate you sticking around and helping us with that story as well. I'm sure we'll be back to you as these details just broke, and we'll get your analysis in just a little bit.
My pleasure.
Thank you.